The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon for some of you and good morning for others. My name is Colleen Doherty, and I am the Recruitment, Engagement, and Volunteerism Coordinator with NASPA. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar for Careers and Student Affairs Month. This week, or today, I'm sorry, we have a number of our colleagues who will be talking about invasion of privacy showing up as practitioners beyond campus. Big shout out to Kirby Gibson from Syracuse University, who helped to organize our amazing panel today. With her are her colleagues, Chris Gillespie and Sean Chrysler, also from Syracuse University, and Michael Riley from DePaul University. So as the webinar is a panel, I will actually let them all introduce themselves. Before we get started, I am going to just let all of our attendees know that in your GoToWebinar toolbar, there's a questions tab. You can put your questions for today's webinar into that tab, and I will be moderating the questions. We are going to leave time for questions at the end, given that today's discussion is a panel discussion. And there's also a chat feature that everyone can use to have some discussions about today's panel. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists.
All righty. Hey, y'all. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoons. Wherever you are in the world. We are all excited to have you all joining us today for this timely but definitely needed conversation that we will be engaging in today and the work that we do. And so we'll start off with some introductions for us, and then just go ahead and jump right into all of the lovely content that we have for y'all. There we go. All right. You want to start off, Caress?
Okay, I guess my picture's up first. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Gillespie. I'm Assistant Director here at Syracuse University, and I've been here for the last 10 years in several roles. So I would say I have sprouted and grown at Syracuse in my professional journey. And so I'm excited to talk to you all today and share a little insight of what that growth has looked like.
All right, Michael.
Oh, I'm going to go next. Sure. Hi, y'all. My name is Michael Akeem Riley. I use he, him, his pronouns, or Michael is fine. I have the privilege of being the LGBTQIA+ Research Center Coordinator within the Office of Multicultural Student Success at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois, not DePaul or DePage. Let's see, I've been at DePaul for 2 years. Or this role in 2 years, and a couple more before as our working with the Center for Identity, Inclusion, and Social Change. It doesn't exist anymore. But previously, though, I know all these folks, or most of these folks, via being an assistant resident director at Syracuse many moons ago. Yeah, super happy to be here. Love Cardi B, love my job, love these folks. Super happy to be here.
All right, Sean.
All right, so my name is Sean Chrysler. I serve as an associate director here at Syracuse University. And for me, I've been here 4 years, originally born in Chicago, and I use he, him, his pronouns, and really excited to be a part of this conversation.
Cool. And then again, my name is Kirby Gibson, Kirby R. Gibson. Don't forget the R. I am a residence director at Syracuse University. I've been here for 4 years now. And have the privilege of working in coalition building with all of these lovely folks in various capacities. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm also from Chicago, Southside 100s. And yeah, just really excited to chat with y'all today. But before we actually get started with our dialogue and this panel, we wanted to really talk about what this is and what it isn't. And so first, definitely want to give a shout out to NASPA for giving us the opportunity to do this, but also want to shout out Cardi B for serving as inspiration for what we're going to be engaging in. And so for the most part, we're really just starting a conversation. This is not the end all be all. We're not going to have all the answers to these questions. It really is us being able to talk about the experiences that we have from various points within our own journeys as practitioners, or you'll learn a little bit more about what we actually define ourselves as. So shortly. We also want to go ahead and acknowledge that we are not speaking on behalf of all marginalized identities, and also want to acknowledge the continued silence and erasure, or trying to erase folks, of those that don't have access to these spaces, specifically our Indigenous and our trans communities. And so definitely want to make sure that we're speaking for ourselves, not anybody else, but still also acknowledge that we do have many intersecting identities that do show up for us today. So that's essentially what we're going to get in the gist in terms of some themes and some talking points that we have inspired by Cardi B. Really talking about like, what does it mean for us to show up as practitioners beyond campus, and acknowledging that we are, the theme for Careers and Student Affairs Month this year is magnifying your lens. And so from making money moves, particularly in terms of defining self and the work that we do, and to I do what I like, I do, in terms of this concept of privacy and authenticity and how they intersect or conflict with one another. But we also want to talk about being careful, particularly because whiteness is everywhere, colonialism is everywhere, and what that means in terms of us navigating the field and community expectations that we have. But in those moments, sometimes we get knocked down 9 times, but we get up 10. And so some takeaways and some tips on how you can continue to live our best lives, particularly when we're in a world where that's being constantly challenged. So let's start off with the first question, y'all. Y'all ready? Y'all excited? Let's get it. Let's get it. All righty. So how do you define yourself within the context of the work that you do in student affairs and higher education? And so do you see yourself as a practitioner, an activist? What does that mean for you? And is it one and the same? And do you find yourself existing in silos? Talk to me, y'all. Talk to me.
Yeah, I could start this one off happily. You know, I think it's different for me, and I didn't know what it was really gonna look like. I would say early in my career, I started off as a practitioner, and really kind of focusing on my work. I see myself now, I think, in my 30s and as an associate director, really more as an educator. I think when you talk about that piece of whiteness, Kirby, and being that, you know, I think one of the pieces for me, I've just decided that if I can, I'll be a beacon of support for other staff of color with marginalized identities. And so that's part of the reason why I stay here at Syracuse. And so I think that I find myself more as an educator because I'm always looking to make myself better at predominantly white institutions, more so I could serve students, but more particularly staff, right? Creating the space for them. I think that when I think about the activist piece, I think for me, I'm a little bit more reserved. And so I think the activist piece for me comes out in settings where I feel safe. But I think it's really strong when I'm at the leadership table and I'm advocating for people with marginalized identities, because sometimes I think in predominantly white institutions or in those spaces, it can be easy to see some of that marginalization happen when we're trying to promote staff or support staff. And so that's when my activism really comes up. That's when I turn up a little bit.
All right. Cool. Michael, I see you pondering.
Yeah, I am. I have a lot of thoughts and feelings. Do I see myself? How do I see myself? So I think, like a lot of us, like a lot of folks who end up, I think, as working in student affairs, we were like very excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed undergrads who were like, you know, doing all the things and really taking all the opportunities, you know, orientation or working as an RA or, you know, all those things. And I did any and all those things. And I think definitely leaned into the idea of being a professional. I think also being someone who was raised, who knew I was going to college, you know, from a middle-class Black experience where it was kind of mandated that I was like, you're going to go to college, you're smart, you're the smart one, you know, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So like I really leaned into that college experience. And I think as I transitioned to working and, you know, getting a master's and stuff, I think I still kind of came in with that idea that like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to be as professional as I can be. And that's going to save me and save other people. And then I quickly realized that through whiteness and a variety of things, through cisness, through, you know, trans oppression, all that stuff, that like me being visibly queer, me being someone who's visibly Black, like professionalism wasn't going to work for me, like the way that I think it was taught, the ways that I think a lot of middle-class Black folks have these conversations with one another. So I think I began reimagining, I think particularly as I got into my second years in grad school and second year at Syracuse, really kind of dismantling the idea of professional and kind of thinking about it more as a practitioner. And it's a privilege that I get to do the work that I get to do. And I'm always at practice with it because I'm still going to make mistakes. I think I'm still informed by these hegemonic systems as much as I can, work to dismantle them. Like I still am informed by those things all the time, and I have to always always working, I guess, sort of like salmon swimming upstream sort of thing. I'm always doing that. So I kind of lean into the more practitioner thing because it feels more active. And I think it's complicated because I think my role as someone who isn't read a super, I'm not oftentimes read as a seasoned professional. And I think some of that's in like my visible queerness and the fact that I'm like, my hair is like this and I'm wearing like a woman's blazer or what have you. I think a lot of folk, especially a lot of activists or younger folks, have oftentimes reached out and had those conversations with me that maybe they wouldn't have with other practitioners. And so I've always, when I would work practitioner, it always becomes a really complicated, kind of muddied space. So for me, I felt a little more solace in using the term practitioner. But I'm intrigued what y'all think about that.
I think it's very interesting because I feel like I had to like earn it, right? Like I think it was funny when I was getting into the field, I was really coached to be like, oh, you're this hip and witted Black woman. Like legit, I was told that you're this hip and witted Black woman. You can do anything. You can succeed in this world. Like you are going to get a master's and be successful. But I really had to like prove that I could do this and really earn that like title that I'm an educator, I'm a practitioner, through kind of getting various titles, through presenting, through being visible on campus through students and doing a lot of work and kind of having students talk about me in various ways and talking about the work that I was doing and having other professionals. And so I felt like I had to like put in a couple of years of work and leverage that with not only my peers, but like in my department, but then across campus to really get the support that I was like really in this work and doing like in student affairs and doing what I was supposed to do to kind of be quote unquote this practitioner. And so it wasn't really until like a couple of years that I thought like, oh, maybe I am an educator because I've like earned those stripes because people started to see like, hey, she really knows how to kind of lead these sessions, or she really has been around this campus and really knows how to navigate these various bureaucracies and systems. And so she can do this work. And so I really felt like I had to like prove it and do a lot of that groundwork of networking and getting people on my team before I could like carry that title. Because before it was like, oh yeah, you can do you're this visible kind of Black body taking up space. But before I was just taking up space. Now I'm able to really make space and create space. And so I think I really had to earn that. And so it wasn't really until the last few years I was able to claim that and really feel resolved in that. And I'm someone who's really like confident in my world and my role. And so for me, it was like, oh, where is this coming from? And I think that was how we like navigate and negotiate and kind of acknowledge who we see as the top in our roles in our field and how we do that and like who we allow to present at conferences, who do we see and bring on to campuses to educate others, and how we present those accolades. You have to put in a lot of time and trudge and know a lot of people to really be seen as this like educator and practitioner that people will go to for support. And I feel like I didn't get that until the last couple of years. And I was like, I felt I put in more hours than that in my first year, really connecting and really doing my job with students. And so I feel like that is where I kind of see this whole practitioner educator is like something you really have to work for and prove with others before you can really identify within it.
I'll just add, it's very interesting, right? Because I'm like, ooh, because it gets into these other parts I want to talk, end up talking about later, right? In terms of like navigating the field and like community expectations and things like that. And so like for me, I see myself as a practitioner, I see myself as an educator, I see myself as a curator, cultivator. I'm like, the coalition builder, a number of different things. I think I entered into this profession, I entered into the field. And so like, I even struggle with even saying the word profession, right? Because like, this concept of like, okay, what does professionalism mean, right? And this idea of what standards is professionalism built in, and like how people are expecting me to show up, and what that means for others and what that means for myself. And I think for me, ever since that my supervisor and mentor sat down with me and had a conversation with me about like, oh, you should go into student affairs, it was already this mark or this expectation that was set for me in terms of like, this is the stuff that I already know you're going to do within the field. And so it's like, it was this matter of like, all right, I got to meet that point. It wasn't the fact that I knew I couldn't show up. I've been taught to have value in terms of who I am. I know what I do. I know what I'm about. I know the standards that I set and the goals that I set for myself. But coming into the field in this piece of like, because that standard was already there for me, continuing to have to meet that standard and go higher and higher. And like this piece of like, in somewhat being somewhat negotiated in the sense of like, so what does that mean for myself and how I truly show up? Or am I showing up just for the sake of what other people are projecting out into the universe of what they want for me? And so it really was this piece about being able to recognize like, I have the capacity to do this work, and I was meant to do this work, and I'm badass at it. Like, I'm good at this work. And being able to do so in a way that felt most comfortable and real for myself. So it's changed this piece of like, I can still do this work, and you're gonna see me wearing an anime t-shirt, right? And that don't have anything to do with the way in which I'm able to get this stuff done. And being able to really more so, and thinking about the work that I want to do in the future of like, I'm really dedicated to really cultivating the future of the field. And so seeing myself as a future faculty member, all of that is about being a lifelong learning and things along those lines. So yeah, that's that for me.
Yeah, Kirby, you really bring up our next point in thinking about authenticity in our work and what does that mean and how do you show up. And so I think the question I'm going to throw out to the group is, how do we manage being kind of our private lives in the context of authenticity, right? And how do we think about that and kind of intersecting with this idea of like, it's a real threat to really show that private, like our private lives, or as some other people in our profession call being vulnerable. You know, that's a word. So what does privacy mean to you in the context of your institution, your communities that you hold within the institution or beyond? And then how do your identities play a role in that?
Ooh.
Yeah,
There's several thoughts.
Yeah, there are. Jeez. I'm gonna just jump in. I'll just start. Cause wow, like this is wow, like I don't even know where to begin from the beginning. So I definitely am an individual who I think leans more towards the idea of like sharing my whole self in all the spaces that I can. I want to make sure that I'm aware also that like that has a certain cost. Like as a Black body, as a Black man, as a queer man, as a feminist-centered person, like that's gonna mean a lot of different things. So like I strive and I push a lot to be really transparent. Like I know there are some practitioners and some folks in student affairs who have like a professional Twitter. Like here's my work Twitter, and then here's my like after 5 Twitter. And I don't like be switching accounts. That's confusing for me. I'm not the most tech savvy person, as Caress can tell you. So like for me, like I just don't want to live a life that way. Like I think I'm informed quite a bit by the works of, you know, Audre Lorde, who talks so often about not living how we don't live single issue lives. And so I can't approach my work that way. With that being said, that means a lot of different things. And I think we need to like acknowledge that. Like I think that when I decide to be that vulnerable with folks, like it can, I think, really build coalition with folks. So like when I talk about, you know, the complicatedness of dating, you know, with students or in an open space, like that can help other people, other students and other folks, and come up and like, you know, build deeper relationships. And I know that means a lot of different things, particularly since I'm queer and I'm talking about like dating other men, someone like that can make someone really uncomfortable. Like I've seen people like, you know, get uncomfortable at like divisional meetings, or I've seen the ways that other queer people will talk about certain things and I won't do that, and I'll try to have a little more vulnerable space, and how that will like, you know, they'll kind of look at me like, girl, we don't talk about that here. Like put on your little rainbow button and be quiet. Like, and that's that. But for me, like for me, I say like, look, when I adorn myself the way I adorn myself because this is what feels great to me. So I think for more likely than not, someone's already placed all those identities upon me. And so I'm going to just go ahead and rock with that, as opposed to spending so much, because I could spend all my time finessing and trying to put away and be like a good queer and a good Black person. But at the end of the day, like, the hegemonic systems that we live in, like, there's no good marginalized thing. Like, it what it wants to do is destroy you, point blank, period. And so if I'm gonna be destroyed, which I'm striving not to be, but if I'm gonna at least come there the full way. Like, I'm not gonna be spending my time and energy switching accounts on my Twitter, and gonna just be more authentic. Understanding that means a lot of different things, and aware of the privileges that I have as someone who is still cis, and comes from a certain SES, and things of that nature that allows me to have the ability to flex the ways that I do. But it's definitely something that I think a lot about, and I think particularly, and I'm talking a lot, but someone who lives in Chicago, that becomes really complicated because the scenes and things are so muddied. So like the queer POC dance parties that are happening in Hyde Park or Pride Noir, something like that, some students may be there and like of age, obviously, but like even still, like that's still like a complicated thing to navigate. I'm happy you asked the question because we don't talk about it. We just like to make it seem like it's really easy, and it's actually not. There's a lot more to it. I could say like 28 million more words, but I'll let someone else take some time.
I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you.
No problem.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Go, Sean. I see you.
Oh, you gonna let me? Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
No, I appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing those points. I think that this is a complicated question about the privacy piece, and it brings up a lot of different memories for me. I think I'll speak to about this piece. I think you talked about being vulnerable. And I think that's a word that I definitely use professionally and use with other people. But I think for me, vulnerability has always been less about me having this naivety towards just being open and free with who I am with everybody in different spaces. It's been more for me about just walking into the places and spaces with an open heart about people, and wanting, as Michael said, to build relationships like this, right? And so for me, vulnerability is more or less about me telling you who I am all the time or what's going on in my life, and more about just walking in places with a constant open heart, regardless of what's going on around me within my life. I think the other piece about privacy, it's still tough for me, good, bad, or indifferent. I will say, I think as a cisgendered male and some of the pieces that come with that, I think for a long time being African American male and sometimes predominantly white spaces, I was really disconnected from the emotional toll of being in those spaces. And as a young professional, I would find myself getting sick or depressed or getting anxious, and I never knew that those things were connected. And so I think that once I got a little older and I realized those things were connected, I tried to find help, through counselors or whatnot, because I think there were a number of microaggressions and things happening at work that sometimes you don't have support to kind of look at somebody and say, that did just happen, right? They did just totally ignore my idea. And so I think that I still work to be vulnerable. I try to do that. I also say with privacy for me, it is still a piece of me that tries to work through the system and present honestly, but I'm also still impacted by the fact that sometimes my goals, my ambitions, or my dreams, or what I want to move forward sometimes feel too big for people, right? And when they see that Black body and they think, well, I want to get this degree, I want to make this move, then it becomes this thing. For example, I remember as a professional, I was telling a colleague this, of having evaluation meetings and not feeling like I could bring my whole self to that space because of what those marks were, or what someone said, or what someone I thought it did. So I still struggle with the privacy piece, but for me, vulnerability means having an open heart and being willing, like Michael said, to build coalition with whoever I'm in company with.
And that's something that I've always appreciated about you, Sean, and thinking about the conversations that we've had about vulnerability, and even like you seeing me grow through that. Because I remember the first time that we sat down and had a conversation, and when you brought up this piece about vulnerable, I was like, bump that. Like that's not what I'm here for. Like that's not what I'm here for. I acknowledge that like sharing emotions and things like that is something that I'm continually like working through, but also have been burnt by and understand the consequences that comes with the navigating identities that I have as a Black woman. And if I were to show emotions, the way in which that is perceived by folks that are on the other end. And like literally thinking about the times where I was in grad school, and the fact of me sharing that, like, oh, my grandfather died. I'm kind of like, somebody asked me how I was doing, like, oh, my grandfather died. How are you doing? Like, this is what's going on. I may need to get ready to go home. And having a supervisor being like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then keep on trucking, right? And so this piece of like navigating this piece of being my whole self, and navigating this piece of like acknowledging when there are those moments of when things do happen to me that happen outside of the context of work, whether it be with family, friends, and things like that. And knowing that I, like, while I try not to necessarily talk about emotions, my emotions are like, they show up in all of in my body. Like I carry them. And for me, it's like, I'll say the privacy piece, I'm very calculated. I'm one of the most calculated individuals that you will ever meet. And thinking about how I'm going to go about what move I'm going to make next, and how this is going to impact this, and then who is going to be impacted by that, and so forth. Like, I have like 15 million iterations in terms of what's going to happen based off of the decision that I make. And because of the fact that I have to navigate this piece of being vulnerable and things like that, in the context of work, it makes it a little bit more challenging, because it then puts me in this place of like, well, do I share? Like, for me, honesty is the best policy, and I'm going to let you know what it is. Also, but at the same time, I know that there are consequences that are affiliated with being vulnerable, and how grace is also given for people like me, because grace is not really a thing for folks of color and other marginalized identities, whether Brene Brown says so or not. Yeah, that's that for me.
And I just want to say it is, it is a privilege.
Right.
You know, and I think that's the other piece that in my growth I had to understand, that it is a privilege, right? And how, you know, like you said, some people are impacted by that, and some not so much.
But I will say what I have learned from you, and what I'm trying to model more often, is acknowledging the community that is built through how you brought it before about like vulnerability as a way of building community and sharing pieces of yourselves that somebody may also relate to too. Because I recognize that there are folks that come into my office that can relate to a similar experience that I have, and by me sharing that experience, it opens up another door and connection for me to be able to be of service to somebody.
I was going to say, just to wrap it up, because I know we got to move on to our next salient question, but I think about the work that we do, right? Like in residence life, living on, like, this doesn't exist. Privacy, like, everybody is all up in your business. Communities compound upon each other, and boundaries are incredibly hard. I remember as a new professional getting into this world, like, everyone wants to be my friend and everyone wants to know about my life. No, it's a setup. They will come for you and they will get you. And people were dirty, and I was like, ugh. And it wasn't just a residence life. And so that's a real hard lesson to learn in our work. And I think about just not only in residence life, just student affairs in general is highly relational. And you have these high contact, high emotion communities that are real, like, sometimes messy. And it's hard to navigate and negotiate, because you have people living with one another, people dealing with highly traumatic events, not only with other students, but even in their own lives, and how they conflict with one another or trigger within people. And so I think about those boundaries that are really hard to set. And I know for me, I didn't set any boundaries when I first started, but then eventually knew that people were going to set me up, right? And so had to really learn about how to navigate those. And I think my friend described it best. Like, I have this really good ability about making people believe that they know all about me, but they know nothing. And kind of just present this persona on campus about who I am, but then in a very kind of, as you said, Kirby, calculated way, to where you know just enough where you don't know it all. And I think it's very intentional, because I think the way our communities kind of mesh within the work that we do makes it to where there's some stuff you need to keep a little bit too close. Or some communities, I know there's some things with my family that I just can't mix with the work that I do or within the community spaces, just because it just doesn't mix too well. And so I think about that and just the work that we do and how we navigate the boundaries and the things with our students and our peers and our colleagues, and how important that is, and how messy that can be.
And at the end of the day, like, there's gonna be just some stuff that you is not gonna find out from me. Like, if I don't want to talk to you about my weekend, I do not want to talk to you about my weekend, right? Like, there sometimes may be moments for that, and acknowledging that I may be in a certain place, not for the sake of me not trying to manage or maintain relationships, but also acknowledging, like, allowing myself to have that space to show up and where I'm at in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think, to Caressa's point, is really important. And I before I wouldn't have probably paid attention to this, but when you think about this bigger picture of all of these filters, all of us just described that we have to bring to work just to come to work. They only pay you to come to work, right? But we all have designed specific filters for specific parts of ourselves, and that's a lot of baggage. And so I think that it's important to articulate that some of that stress you sometimes feel is the way to managing all of those filters, and you don't even know it. You're calling in sick, or you're calling in whatever your marginalized identity is, or you're taking vacation. Those things pile up. And I think to Caressa's point, I think the fact that we sometimes can't share our family is more of an indication that the space has not been made for us. That type of community and those community norms. So
that's real.
With that, kind of looking at that, I want to kind of get to another important point. And so that's this be careful piece, is navigating the field and community. So how do you navigate field expectations and community expectations in the context of the work that you do, right? So how do you navigate field expectations and community expectations in context of the work that you do? Because a lot of people, based on your identities, are looking for something, or looking for some type of support or representation, if you will. So how do you navigate that?
I'll go ahead and start. And so I immediately think back to how we were coming together and planning this and talking about what our main points and things we wanted this to be with. And the conversations, particularly that Caressa and Michael and I were having, was this piece of like navigating, feeling as though like you're a pawn in the system, right? And so this piece of acknowledging the access that we have and the privilege that we have from having master's degrees, and this fact of having access to resources, and whatever resources mean in the context for you, because I was go ahead and own, not everybody have access to the same resources across the work that we do in higher ed. Sometimes it's a struggle to get some pizza at a student event. But really acknowledging this piece of like being in this space and acknowledge, like being in the higher education itself is a privilege in overall, right? But also navigating and negotiating like this piece with like family members. And so like this piece of being seen like, oh, you're better than me because you think you're better than me because you have this master's degree, or you think you're better than me, or like why are you being so uptight, or being so feeling so offended by me making a problematic statement, and me calling that out in that moment. And so having to negotiate and navigate the expectations that my peers or more so my family members often sometimes have of me, because they don't necessarily understand the place in which I'm in. But I also recognize too, it's an issue of access, right? And it's an issue of the exposure and whatnot that I have had, and the privileges that I have been afforded to get to this place and be able to work within higher education. While also at the same time acknowledging that higher education is in student affairs is like, it's a setup. It's a setup. Because we're operating in a system that was not made for people that look like me and other marginalized identities. Yet it's like I got to work within the system to help people out that also look like me, but it's still like, am I still upholding the system that I'm working within? And so like this constant like pulling in so many different directions of like, how can I still be authentic and true to the work that I do, but then also like being told and like in one place of like, oh, this protest is going on, but we want you to monitor that protest. Don't participate in it. But at the same time, like still see what's going on, while at the same time navigating the expectations that I have outside of the community.
Yeah, when this question came up in our conversation, we talked about the power of whiteness, right? And how it permeates and like carries with us. And so thinking about how higher ed is built in kind of systemic whiteness and kind of we operate within these systems and get kind of boundaried and held to these systems, and how when we move off campus and kind of these systems still stick to us and how we're labeled. And so I talked about how like when I'm on campus, I am kind of seen as othered and not white or don't fit in with kind of the standard of whiteness. But then when I'm like within kind of community spaces or with my family, I'm like labeled as, oh, you're white, or oh, you're acting white, or oh, why are you're just like, you're being white. And so kind of trying to negotiate and figure out what that meant was really hard, especially when I first got into this work, because I was like, like, how am I white? Like, I knew I moved to Syracuse and there wasn't a lot of sun, but like, I didn't know I got that real light. And so for me, it was really trying to figure out and unpack that. And it wasn't until lots of books, lots of Black feminist theory and reflection that I realized how kind of whiteness was kind of operating not only as a system of the job that I was doing, but as a system of how people were seeing the job that I was doing and expecting me to be a part of that system. And so even when I was talking to my family, they just automatically assumed that I was like this man, right? A part of the system and not able to understand or hear or reflect or connect or go to the corner store and get a chicken plate. Like I couldn't do those things because of my job and my role. And so it was really hard to really break those down and show that I was like ratchet still with a master's degree. And like I think about code switching and how that I had to strengthen that a little bit better and code switch to fit back in with my family and communities I had before I got the job that I had. And even as I moved through and kind of moved through these positions in my role in residence life and kind of gotten up, I had to really further develop that code switching and kind of be able to talk to my family because I was moving up, right? And they were like, oh, she's really white now. She's gotten all these titles. Like,
I don't got no white money.
Right. And so it was really trying to figure out how to make sure they knew who I was still. And it wasn't that I was like the identities and the systems I was working in wasn't who I was, or I wasn't trying to become them. I was just working within them. And I was still trying to change them in it. And I think that also came with like the language I was learning about kind of social justice and trying to slowly educate my mother on macro and microaggressions and all the things. And like even then, trying to have that conversation was still really hard. And so I think it's really hard to think about how kind of when we work within these systems, especially systems of oppression, and we are othered within them, but then moving out, we still carry them in some type of way, and how us carrying them can impact how we're seeing how we do the work.
Yeah.
You all said a lot of really great things. I don't even know what else to really add. But I do want to say, like, one of the things that have helped me navigate through how do I work with everyone else, because I think particularly, like, you know, in residence life, but I think in student affairs in general, there's this, like, weird navigation, or you're working really closely with like very sensitive and heavy topics of talking about. Most jobs you don't get to like host dialogues on like, I don't know, white supremacy. And you know, for us and DePaul, you know, thinking about the Laquan McDonald case, like, we were just, that's part of my job. It's like, what are you up to this week? Oh, I'm planning a workshop on, you know, talking about the death of Laquan McDonald and police brutality. Like, what are you up to? And Susan's like an accountant and she's crunching numbers. So like it brings about like a different kind of feeling. And one of the things that have allowed for me to like navigate the field a lot less disappointed and mad has been for me to really not give up. This is gonna sound really pessimistic, and I'm a pretty optimistic person, but like for me to, again, going back to like something I was saying a little bit earlier, is to be like, we're all like informed by these really like problematic, hegemonic, for lack of a better word, like really bad systems. We've all been informed by white supremacy and cis sexism and homophobia at all. That's just it. And instead of thinking that people have like gotten out of it, like I'm thinking about it differently to think now this person is striving to step out of that, but like their go-to, their natural way, because all of our natural ways, because we've all, even if you have like hippy dippy parents who grew up on a commune farm with like goats and no one you like, you were thinking about gender pronouns and reading Audre Lorde from the jump and you were making your own bread. Even with all of that, like the world of itself is not that. And at one point you had to engage with the world in some way, shape, or form. And so instead I've been able to like really think about what are the ways that you're striving to, not that you've gotten it ever, that you like, you don't do those things anymore, not that you're woke, but to be like, to continually think about folks as folks who are always in the work and always, again, swimming upstream and more so. So then when people do make mistakes, because they're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna make mistakes, instead of me being like, that's it, I'm throwing this person out, it's allowed me to be like, you know what, you're showing up really great this way, but let me not put you on this pedestal. There's no like good white person, there's no good cis person, there's no someone who like has gone through it all. And that's allowed me to work with folks the way that our work allows us to work and needs us to work in close proximity, where I'm not gonna like end up super hurt, because I think I've done that before, where I've had white people and like, nah, this is my white girl, like she got it, she's always been here, she's da-da-da-da-da, like this is my ride or die. And then they've done things and I'm like, ooh.
I would say that even showed up too for folks that like kinfolk ain't always like skinfolk ain't always kinfolk.
I was gonna go there too, because I know a lot of I've been policed the most by other Black professionals who said me to not wear my hair this way, to not get my nails done, to not pick out your hair when I had a fro, like pick out your hair if you're going for this interview. And I'm like, girl, I don't have time for that. It's already 9 o'clock. Like it's time for bed. Like I can't do all that. But that's who's told me the most. And the thing is, I think we've internalized that because they've gotten to certain points, and to get there, sometimes those folks have had to do those things. And it's a privilege, I think, on their backs, I'm able to like not do that. But they sometimes are like, nah, but I did this, and that's all they know. So it's ugly. And you're right, I don't even want to just put it on to folks who are white or folks who are other folks of color. Black folk can do this to Black folk and have continued to.
Yeah, it's a generational trauma that we have been taught to have to navigate. That's forms of masking forms of mentorship or helping guide you through the profession, because this is what worked for you at that time, and that was the time and place. But things are constantly shifting and changing, and you have to acknowledge that people want to be able to show up in how they would like to, not just based off of what is meant to help you survive, but really more so you want to thrive.
Yeah, I would just add that that navigating expectations and community. I'll say I think for myself, the community piece is still important to me, but I think you all are right. I never thought I would have to, going back home would be as hard as it's gotten as I've progressed, with my education. I never thought that was going to be an issue. I've gone to Chicago a few times and I swear they've tried to revoke my pass once or twice. I have to remind folks, put my slang back on and my Chicago accent and all those things. And so, but I think that when you talk about the piece about mentorship and all those things, I just wanted to say that I think now as I work with professionals, I'm much more aware of that, right? And so I really try to, especially when I'm working with staff and I'm giving advice, I always try to give it with a grain of salt and say, hey, this might not work for you. Right, depending on the intersection of your identities. I'm just trying to tell you a story, give you some sense of why it works for me, why I did it this way. I'm expecting you to come up what works, for you, and just kind of take that. So I just wanted to put that piece, because I think you're right, Michael, that sometimes you get folks who give you advice and that's what worked then, but sometimes it's not even culturally sensitive to what works for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we get to our last point?
Do we want to take it to questions? Because we're almost on time. I forgot we like to chat.
We do. Do you want to? Oh, are there other questions?
Oh, wait, what?
What's that say?
Input your questions. Oh, we got to get questions first. But maybe we can, as we wait for questions, we can talk about what keeps us motivated. What do we do to kind of navigate these things? How do we live our best lives? Besides listening to Cardi B, Avi.
I'll say for me, and it took me a long time to get here. You know, when I first joined in the profession, for the most part, I've been in the profession always married. And I think when I first came in, you know, with all transparency, I worked really hard. I worked a lot of hours, you know, trying to be the best that I could in whatever position. So much so, I think I can honestly say it almost cost me my marriage and the family that I have, because I think I was so focused on working as many hours, being there for students, being, you know, not setting boundaries, being there all times of the night, that it cost me. And I think that I thank God that I was able to kind of focus on that and refocus that attention with that. So for example, I didn't take vacation days, sick days, all those things. Now that is totally different. So now I really focus on really what is this all gonna mean? And I think for me, what when I get knocked down, what keeps me up is just realizing that, you know, after I'm gone, or whether I'm here today, gone tomorrow, that it's really the relationship with my family and my colleagues. And so I think that I balance the work. I take my vacation. I take my sick days if I'm sick. But I do what I need to do, and I pour into my family, and I pour into colleagues like you. Because to me, at the end of the day, that really matters. And I think that that's helped keep me grounded. It's also helped keep me healthy, you know, because now I go to the gym and I make time for myself. And so I think when you get knocked down, sometimes as a younger professional, my answer was to just work hard. And not pour into any of those other relationships. But I learned early, thank goodness, that, or thank God I should say, that not pouring in myself into the people around me was actually where I should have been spending my time. So that keeps me balanced.
All right, so we do have one question from Lindsay Davis. As Lindsay says, as a new professional, how do you suggest establishing boundaries with your colleagues without coming off as rude?
Yep.
Well, so first, so when I hear that question, this is me problematizing the question, right? And so, what is this construct of rude, right? And how are people, like, how is that being projected onto who you are as an individual, right? And so it was interesting the other day, somebody posted in the Black SAP group around this. It was something about like navigating being at a PWI and like being like too much, or I can't remember specifically what it was, right? But again, going back to this construct of professionalism, right? And so I think for you, it's more of like you're being fully authentic to yourself. I think, like, of course, I think you want to be like, there's a piece of mindfulness, right? That I think you definitely want to have in that, and acknowledging where you're at in that moment, right? And how you may be either triggered or whatnot by that question being asked. But also, if it's something like, at the end of the day, those boundaries are for you. And so people shouldn't necessarily feel some type of way about the boundaries that you're establishing for yourself. And if they are, that's their problem, not yours. But be very, like, I think there's nothing wrong with being open about that, but also still acknowledging where you're at in that moment, and also whoever's on the receiving end of that is. And feel free to chime in, anybody else.
I set limits because, one, I'm tired.
Right.
With my weeks. Two, I'm on a budget. Rent is real. and I got goals. So I think it's about like thinking about your limits, right, financially, socially, emotionally, and what are you willing to give, and what other goals do you have, and thinking about your time, right? Because you got other time to spend in things. And so I think about that balance. And I know I have some really amazing colleagues that think about reaching out to others intentionally, right? Through lunches, through dinners, like once a week, and sprinkling that out and being intentional with those boundaries and saying, okay, this is where I'm at this month, and that's okay. And being like resolved in that, and that won't take away from the relationships you have. And if people feel like that, then that's on them. But I think about, like, we all have those limits and boundaries, and if people probe those too much, then like that's on them. But I think it's for you to think about where are your limits, and kind of engaging and setting those based on the time that you have in your week, the budget, and where you can kind of manage those. Because I know my schedule, I can barely even see my friends, and so I'm on a 2-week rotation socially. And so I think about how do you think about what works for you, and knowing that it looks different, and you don't have to explain that. And if you feel like you do, like sitting on that a little bit and maybe saying, why do I feel like I need to explain this to this person? Because if they feel like they may be rude. That's just me.
So I agree with the things that were shared, but I also want to note and name like the messiness of where we work and where we live, like especially if you're like living on, but even not if you're not living on, like I lived on, and the Lord had said it wasn't for me anymore.
Hallelujah.
Different. And I did, and it was, great in some ways, and rent is real, and I sometimes despise paying it. But like, so I want to say, especially if you're like new to the field, and if you're new to your job, and if you are, especially I think if you're a woman, like people are going to expect you to want to have a higher threshold for social interaction, which isn't fair at all. I see Caressa already shaking her head, but I think the ways that, so as someone who's like, I am read as, I'm a cis man, and I am pretty social and have a pretty like high threshold for like social engagements. My wallet, on the other hand, but myself, I usually am pretty excited to get to know new people. But I think there are lots of folk who, particularly women who I've seen who like don't have that same kind of threshold, who get treated really quickly to be mean or like a bitch or like all these really horrible words we're gonna throw around. That like for me, it's people like, oh my God, you want to do all this? It's so great. You're such a great team player. But women are like, actually, I'm a little more private. I really am invested in like my couch and Netflix by myself, or maybe I'm really connected to my family or other outside spaces, and that's gonna mean a lot of different things. I hope, which like I share with most folks who are getting into the field, that like as you navigate and kind of like find your fit for like an office space or an institution to be at, to really spend some time asking like what, to kind of get an energy to like, okay, so here are the more outspoken people, because we live in a world where extroversion is the norm. Try to engage some of those introverted people too, to see like, are they treated, what's that same kind of treatment, how are they treated, what does it mean to kind of be a more introverted person, or someone who maybe does have some more boundaries and things out. And also to note that like, I think there can be, I don't even know how to, I'll leave it there. I'll stop here.
Yeah, nothing to add from me. I am interested, if there's not another question, about how you all, what do you do to stay motivated if you get knocked down, or to kind of get back up? I know we don't have that much time, but I'd be interested in maybe some short answers.
A really good therapist, one.
Yes.
Not rooted in capitalism or shopping because of budgets. I think about the communities, and so really reconnecting and having time to kind of talk with people who I think are inspiring and motivate me and have really great ideas. And so I think those are relationships that I think really motivate me. And so I have friends that spanned my career that I've met, that have various passions that I often reconnect back with and check back into. And some of them I may have not talked to in like months or even years, but I think reconnecting to those, or like those networks that I've built, really re-energize me and keep me motivated in this work. And I think even kind of talking to colleagues or connecting with colleagues. So Kirby and I, we've sometimes even had like webinars or presented and come together over topics we're really passionate about, and thinking about trying to call out these really effed up norms we have in the work that we do and critically think about those. Those are really what keeps me motivated to think about how can we change the conversation about what's happening and what we do, who we are. And so thinking about connecting with people who like to do that and having those conversations keeps me energized, and know that those communities exist and happen not only with, like, you can go to conferences and find those people, but then you can also find those people in kind of like those different like chat rooms or Facebook groups, and like you can find those communities without going to a conference. And so I think I have those communities in different ways, and I just kind of go back to them and be like, spark a conversation, and really enjoy that as a way to refresh.
I think we have a really good question about code switch.
Whoa.
Yes, we do.
I don't know if the order. Yep, jump on in.
So the question is from Khadijah, and Khadijah says, in your experiences and I am shortening the question just a little bit, but in your experiences for people of color who do not code switch, do you see that they have a hard time integrating into the profession, being seen as a student affairs professional, and ultimately being trusted to do their jobs? Can you give some examples if you have any?
Ooh.
I know it's a heavy one.
Yeah.
So I'll say this. I have seen, I want to make sure I articulate this. I have seen professionals enter the profession, do well, and not code switch. I also want to say, I think what's unique about them and what I always find fascinating about those professionals is they also tend to be very clear and centered on who they are, and their ability to kind of get through it. And that's not to say having filters is bad. I think for a number of us, we have filters, but I think for people who I've seen, at least in that realm, I'll talk about code switching, are fine with the consequences and benefits of that direction. Right. And I always appreciate them for that, because there are times when I don't code switch, depending on, how I'm feeling. And, if I'm sitting at the leadership table, it's going to be how I said it. Right. And that's just how it's going to be. And so I think that folks who are able to do that, straightforward are in tune with the benefits and consequences of that direction, like anything else.
Yeah. But I'm glad that you brought up consequences, Sean, because we have to go ahead and name that those consequences are real, regardless of how people are asked to show up, particularly marginalized people. Our bodies are being constantly policed, whether we want them to or not. And so if I end up showing up as the respectable Kirby, I'm still gonna be treated as the not respectable Kirby, or I'm gonna be treated as this Black woman with this mohawk on her head and this this hair color, or all these other whatever you want to insert about me, because of the fact and because of the biases and isms that people carry around, both overtly, covertly, whenever, right? And so I think it's something we as a field have to further start unpacking and really naming, and I'll say it's beyond naming and unpacking. You got to do some shit about it. Because it is leading folks that are choosing to enter this profession to want to no longer stay, because they feel as though they have to compromise and sacrifice pieces of who they are for the sake of being able to maintain a job and make ends meet, or the nature of the field being small. And I'm going to go ahead and use that against you so you don't progress within the field. That's problematic as fuck. And if somebody continues to do that to you, you don't want to work there.
Absolutely. Two things really quick. One, I don't know if there's a space where you don't have to, or where code switching isn't something that folks strongly encourage. I think we've gotten into a world where now some cool offices are probably yeah, bring your whole self there. So I think regardless if you're in the field and student affairs or out, code switching is kind of, I think, just the norm of that double consciousness that Du Bois has been talking about forever, the things that people before him have been talking about. Here's a new thing about folks who don't code switch. I think is really interesting and kind of nasty. I use nasty intentional. So if you don't code switch, I think sometimes folks think they can talk to you like that. And because we don't usually work in spaces where everyone I work with isn't Black. So if I code switch and engage with somebody in that kind of language and someone else decides to engage with that, not saying it's right, but I think you have to also be ready for that too. Because people, especially, let's just name it, with Blackness being in the workplace and Blackness oftentimes being associated with things that are fun and cool, folks typically, are gonna jump in and wanna, you say girl, they see me and Caress kikiing on something, and it's me, they're gonna be oh wait, I can get in there too. And it's no, you can't. Please stop. And that becomes a really awkward conversation to have on occasion. So I don't know, it's a tricky thing, code switching, and I think we have to talk about the repercussions of also not code switching in the way that folks get extra comfy cozy with you then. You're like,
Mhm.
Really good question. And I know we're at time. So I did put up our information here for folks to reach out to us to continue the conversation. You'll see our Twitter handles. I meant to bring that up earlier for y'all to tweet us and stuff throughout the presentation, but it's all good. It happens. Something happened to the screen. Oh, there we go. But yeah, feel free to email us, reach out to us via social media, all that jazz. We would love to hear your thoughts, continue the conversation. Yeah. Final thoughts, y'all?
I would just say that just realize that student affairs is not a short game; it's a long game. And realize that the stresses that you bear, the filters that you use in meetings, the parts of yourself that you bring and you don't bring, does take a mental toll. And so, make sure you take care of your physical health, your spiritual health, as well as your mental health.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just got to cut it out. To cut out all the toxicity in your life and relationships that you have with people, family members, in the workplace, whatever that is, because you got to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people.
All right. Well, thank you all once again for presenting today and really moving, not just starting this discussion, because this discussion is being had in our spaces and needs to be continued and really needs to be brought to the full attention of the field. So thank you so much for being here and doing that for us today. For everyone who was on the webinar, thank you so much for joining us. Our last webinar for Careers and Student Affairs Month will be this Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And the webinar will be on supporting undocumented students in higher education. The webinar will be presented by Flavio Bravo from the University of San Francisco and Dr. Mary Wardell Girarduzzi, also from the University of San Francisco. And so we really look forward to that webinar as well. So thank you once again to our presenters, and we look forward to everyone joining us on Thursday.
thanks for having us. And thank you, Kirby, for putting this together.
Thanks.
Bye.
Shout out to Kirby.
Right. Go,
Shout out to
Kirby.
all y'all.
Thank you all so much, and thank you, Kirby.
See ya.
Bye.
Where's my